This is a story I've been putting together in pieces for most of my adult life. That's the nature of it. It's not something I experienced all at once and then sat down and wrote out. It's something I've assembled gradually, the way you assemble a picture from fragments found in different drawers over different years, comparing them against each other, turning them over, trying to understand how they fit. Some of the pieces I have from my own memory. Some of them came from conversations with my parents. One crucial piece came from my grandmother before she passed. And the piece I found most recently, the one that reordered everything else, I found about 2 years ago in a box of old photographs my mother gave me when she was clearing out her house. I want to start with what I remember directly, because I think that's the honest place to start. I was young when this happened, young enough that my memories of it have that quality that very early childhood memories have, vivid in some details, completely absent in others, the emotional register often clearer than the factual one. I was somewhere between 4 and 6. I know it was summer because the light in my memories of her is summer light, long and warm and coming in at the low angle of late afternoon. I know I was in our house, the house I grew up in, the one my parents moved out of when I was in high school. And I know there was a woman who looked after me. Her name, in my memory, is May. Not a name my parents use or have used for anyone in our family or circle of friends. Just May, which is what I called her and what she called herself when she told me her name, which she did once in a direct and simple way, the way adults sometimes tell small children their names when they want to be known properly rather than just as the adult in the room. She said, "My name is May," and I said it back to her, and she smiled. She was older, not elderly, not grandmother old, but older than my parents were at the time, which would put her in her 50s or 60s, I'd estimate now, though a child's sense of adult age is notoriously unreliable. She had gray streaked hair that she wore pinned up loosely, and she wore dresses, always the kind of cotton house dresses that were already old-fashioned by the time I was a child. She was calm in the way that some people are calm, not as a performance or an effort, but as a baseline. The way the temperature of a room is calm, a quality of the atmosphere rather than a decision. Being around her felt like being somewhere comfortable. I have maybe 4 or 5 distinct memories of her. She read to me. I remember that she had a way of reading aloud that was unhurried and expressive without being theatrical, the kind of reading that draws you fully into what's happening in the book without making you aware that someone is performing it. She made something in the kitchen that I remember being delicious but can't identify now. She sat with me on the back steps one evening while the sun was going down, and we watched the fireflies come out. And she told me something about fireflies that I wish I could remember, something that made the fireflies seem more wonderful than they already were. She was there for what feels in memory like a period of weeks, maybe a summer, and then she wasn't. No dramatic departure, no farewell that I can recall, just the gradual recognition, the way a child recognizes these things, that she wasn't coming anymore. I didn't think about May consciously for years after that. She was a piece of early childhood, real but unexamined, filed in the category of things that simply were. The first time I asked about her, I was in my early teens. I don't know what prompted it. Something must have, some association triggered the memory. But I asked my mom at dinner one night if she remembered May who used to babysit me. And my mom looked at me with a slightly puzzled expression and said, "May?" I said, "Yes, May, the woman who used to watch me when I was little, older woman, gray hair." My mom shook her head slowly and said she didn't know who I was talking about. I thought she'd just forgotten. Childhood babysitters aren't necessarily memorable to parents years later, especially if the arrangement was brief. I said, in the summers when I was little, and described May as best I could. My mom listened and then said, "We didn't have a regular babysitter when you were that age. We used your aunt sometimes, Mrs. Peterson, from next door when she was available. No one named May." I filed it as a memory confusion. Kids misremember things. The person in my memory I was calling May could have been Mrs. Peterson or my aunt or some combination of remembered adults recomposed into a single figure. This is a thing that happens with early childhood memories, and I applied it without too much difficulty and moved on. But May didn't feel like a confusion. She felt specific. She felt like a person. I asked my dad about it separately, maybe a year later, not telling him I'd already asked my mom. Same result. He had no memory of a babysitter named May, no memory of a woman matching my description being in our house in that role during those years. He was pleasant about it, said early memories were funny things, but he was certain. I let it go for a long time after that. Years. I was an adult and living my own life, and May was a small, unresolved piece of early childhood, possibly a confusion, possibly just a memory that had drifted from its original source. These things happen. I was at peace with not knowing. Then my grandmother got sick. She was in her 80s, and it was the long kind of sick, the kind that gives you time to sit with people and talk, which was painful and also, in a way I didn't fully appreciate until she was gone, a gift. I visited her as often as I could in her last year, and we talked about all kinds of things. Her life, my parents' childhoods, the family history that lives only in the memories of the oldest generation and disappears with them if you don't ask while you can. On one of those visits, I don't remember why it came up, but I mentioned May. I said I had this memory from when I was very young of a woman who looked after me, older, gray-streaked hair, wore house dresses, and that when I'd asked my parents about her, neither of them remembered anyone like that. I said I'd always wondered who she was. My grandmother was quiet for a moment. Not the quiet of someone who doesn't know what to say, the quiet of someone who is deciding. Then she said, "What did you say her name was?" I said May. My grandmother looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on her face before, and haven't seen on anyone's face since. Something between recognition and their kind of careful stillness, like she was handling something fragile. She said, "May was my mother's name." I let that sit for a second. I said, "Your mother?" She said yes. Her mother, my great-grandmother, who had died in 1971, 13 years before I was born. I sat with that for a long time in that room with my grandmother. Then I said carefully, "Can you tell me what she looked like?" My grandmother described her. Gray-streaked hair that she wore pinned up loosely. Cotton house dresses. Calm in a way that was a quality of her rather than an effort. A particular way of reading aloud that her children and grandchildren had all loved. I did not say anything about the fireflies. I didn't want to color anything. I just listened. When she was done, I said, "That's who I remember." My grandmother looked at me for a long time. Then she said, simply and without drama, the way she said most true things, "She always loved children. She would have wanted to meet you." I drove home from that visit and I sat in my car in the parking lot of my apartment building for a while before I went inside, not upset, not frightened, just full. That particular fullness that comes when something you've held unresolved for a long time finds its shape. I called my mom that night and told her what my grandmother had said. My mom was quiet for a long time and then she said, "Mom never mentioned that to us." Meaning my grandmother had never told my parents what she'd apparently decided in that room with me. Which meant my grandmother had held it too, whatever she believed about it, and kept it to herself until I asked the right question. That was years ago now. My grandmother has since passed. My parents are older. The house I grew up in belongs to another family. Then 2 years ago, my mother gave me a box of old photographs when she was clearing out. She'd sorted through them and pulled out the ones she thought I'd want. Childhood pictures, family occasions, the accumulated photographic record of a family's life. I went through the box over a weekend, the pleasant archaeology of old photos, and near the bottom of the box I found one I didn't recognize. It was a snapshot, the kind taken with an inexpensive film camera, slightly faded the way photos from that era fade. It showed a backyard, a yard I recognized as the yard of my childhood home, the garden my mother kept along the fence, the old oak tree in the corner. In the yard there were 2 figures, a small child sitting in the grass. Myself, I was certain by the age and the look of him, and sitting beside the child, partially turned away from the camera so that her face was in 3/4 profile, a woman. Older, gray-streaked hair pinned up loosely. A cotton house dress. On the back of the photograph, in handwriting I didn't recognize, summer. Just that word. No year, no names. Summer. I sat with that photograph for a long time. I've shown it to my parents. Neither of them knows when it was taken or who took it. Neither of them recognizes the woman. My mother says she doesn't remember anyone like that being in the yard with me, and she's looked at the photograph carefully and at length and still has nothing. The photograph is in a frame on my bookshelf now. I look at it sometimes. The two figures in the summer yard, the oak tree, the garden along the fence, the woman beside the small child, turned slightly away, three-quarter profile, not quite giving herself fully to the camera, the way people sit when they're absorbed in something else, when they don't know they're being photographed or don't particularly mind either way. I can't see her face clearly, but I know the gray-streaked hair pinned up loosely. I know the cotton house dress. I know the quality of the afternoon light in the photograph, warm and long and summer, and I know what the small child sitting in the grass with her must have felt, the way children feel the quality of people without knowing the words for it yet. Comfortable, safe, somewhere good, wherever May is, whatever she was doing in a yard in the summer in a year, I can't identify sitting with a child who wouldn't be born until more than a decade after she died. I'm grateful. I'm grateful she was there. I'm grateful for whatever it is that made her want to be there. Whatever love for children or love for family or love that doesn't require a body to keep expressing itself brought her to that yard on that afternoon. I hope she's somewhere with good light. I hope there are fireflies. And I hope whatever she told me about them on those back steps in the long summer evening when I was small enough to hear things that way, I hope some part of me held on to it. I hope some part of me still knows. Sleep well tonight. The people who loved us don't always need a reason to come back and sit with us a while. Sometimes they just do. And that's enough. That's more than enough. Good night.